The motions, which the planets now have could not spring from any natural cause alone, but were impressed by an intelligent agent. Isaac Newton. God in the beginning formed matter and solid, massy, hard, impenetrable, movable particles, of such sizes and figures, and with such other properties, and in such proportion to space, as most conduced to the end for which he formed them. Absolute space, in its own nature, without regard to anything external, remains always similar and immovable. Relative space is some movable dimension or measure of the absolute spaces, which our senses determine by its position to bodies, and which is vulgarly taken for immovable space. Isaac Newton. Religion and philosophy are to be preserved distinct. We are not to introduce divine revelations into philosophy, nor philosophical opinions into religion. We are certainly not to relinquish the evidence of experiments for the sake of dreams and vain fictions of our own devising, nor are we to recede from the analogy of nature, which is wont to be simple and always consonant to itself. Isaac Newton. The word God usually signifies Lord. But every Lord is not a God. It is the dominion of a spiritual being which constitutes a God. A true, supreme, or imaginary dominion makes a true, supreme or imaginary God. It may be that there is no such thing as an equable motion, whereby time may be accurately measured. All motions may be accelerated or retarded. But the true or equable progress of absolute time is liable to no change. Infinites, when considered absolutely, without any restriction or limitation, are neither equal nor unequal, nor have any certain proportion one to another, and therefore, the principle that all infinites are equal is a precarious one. Hypotheses should be subservient only in explaining the properties of things but not assumed in determining them, unless so far as they may furnish experiments. In experimental philosophy, we are to look upon propositions inferred by general induction from phenomena as accurately or very nearly true, notwithstanding any contrary hypotheses that may be imagined, till such time as other phenomena occur, by which they may either be made more accurate, or liable to exceptions. It is indeed a matter of great difficulty to discover, and effectually to distinguish, the true motions of particular bodies from the apparent, because the parts of that immovable space, in which those motions are performed, do by no means come under the observation of our senses. The smaller the planets are, they are, other things being equal, of so much the greater density, for so the powers of gravity on their several surfaces come nearer to equality. They are likewise, other things being equal, of the greater density, as they are nearer to the sun. Isaac Newton. If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants. Isaac Newton. I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself, I seem to have been only like a boy, playing on the seashore, and diverting myself and now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. Errors are not in the art but in the artificers. I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. We build too many walls and not enough bridges. To every action there is always opposed an equal reaction. Genius is patience. Plato is my friend. Aristotle is my friend. But my greatest friend is truth. My powers are ordinary. Only my application brings me success. This most beautiful system of the sun, planets and comets, could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. Isaac Newton. Atheism is so senseless. When I look at the solar system, I see the Earth at the right distance from the Sun to receive the proper amounts of heat and light. This did not happen by chance. Truth is ever to be found in simplicity, and not in the multiplicity and confusion of things. In the absence of any other proof, the thumb alone would convince me of God's existence. I have a fundamental belief in the Bible as the Word of God, written by those who were inspired. I study the Bible daily. What goes up must come down. Tact is the art of making a point without making an enemy. As a blind man has no idea of colors, so have we no idea of the manner by which the all-wise God perceives and understands all things. Isaac Newton. A man may imagine things that are false, but he can only understand things that are true. For if the things be false, the apprehension of them is not understanding. An object in motion tends to remain in motion along a straight line unless acted upon by an outside force. The proper method For inquiring after the properties of things is to deduce them from experiments. To me there has never been a higher source of earthly honor or distinction than that connected with advances in science. Opposite to godliness is atheism in profession and idolatry in practice. Atheism is so senseless and odious to mankind that it never had many professors. Gravity may put the planets into motion, but without the divine power, it could never put them into such a circulating motion as they have about the Sunday, and therefore, for this as well as other reasons, I am compelled to ascribe the frame of this system to an intelligent agent. Isaac Newton. God is the same God, always and everywhere. He is omnipresent not virtually only, but also substantially, for virtue cannot subsist without substance. Isaac Newton. God is a relative word and has a respect to servants, and deity is the dominion of God, not over his own body, as those imagine who fancy God to be the soul of the world, but over servants. Isaac Newton. The best and safest method of philosophizing seems to be first to inquire diligently into the properties of things, and establishing those properties by experiments, and then to proceed more slowly to hypotheses for the explanation of them. Isaac Newton. If the experiments which I urge be defective, it cannot be difficult to show the defects. But if valid, then by proving the theory, they must render all objections invalid. The same law takes place in a system consisting of many bodies, as in one single body, with regard to their persevering in their state of motion or of rest. For the progressive motion, whether of one single body or of a whole system of bodies, is always to be estimated from the motion of the center of gravity. Isaac Newton. I there represent that I sent notice of my method to Mr. Leibniz before he sent notice of his method to me, and left him to make it appear that he had found his method before the date of my letter. God made and governs the world invisibly, and has commanded us to love and worship him and no other God, to honor our parents and masters, and love our neighbors as ourselves, and to be temperate, just and peaceable, and to be merciful, even to brute beasts. If anyone offers conjectures about the truth of things from the mere possibility of hypotheses, I do not see by what stipulation anything certain can be determined in any science, since one or another set of hypotheses may always be devised, which will appear to supply new difficulties. It is reasonable that forces directed toward bodies depend on the nature and the quantity of matter of such bodies, as happens in the case of magnetic bodies. The hypothesis of matters being at first evenly spread through the heavens is, in my opinion, inconsistent with the hypothesis of innate gravity, without a supernatural power to reconcile them, and therefore it infers a deity. Nothing can be divided into more parts than it can possibly be constituted of. But matter cannot be constituted of infinite parts. The ancients considered mechanics in a twofold respect: as rational, which proceeds accurately by demonstration, and practical. To practical mechanics all the manual arts belong, from which mechanics took its name. Isaac Newton. In the beginning of the year 1665, I found the method of approximating series, and the rule for reducing any dignity of any binomial into such a series. The motions of the comets are exceedingly regular, and they observe the same laws as the motions of the planets, but they differ from the motions of vortices in every particular, and are often contrary to them. Resistance is usually ascribed to bodies at rest, and impulse to those in motion. But motion and rest, as commonly conceived, are only relatively distinguished, nor are those bodies always truly at rest, which commonly are taken to be so. Isaac Newton. Why there is one body in our system qualified to give light and heat to all the rest, I know no reason, but because the author of the system thought it convenient. And why there is but one body of this kind, I know no reason, but because one was sufficient to warm and enlighten all the rest. Just as the system of the sun, planets and comets is put in motion by the forces of gravity, and its parts persist in their motions, so the smaller systems of bodies also seem to be set in motion by other forces, and their particles to be variously moved in relation to each other, and, especially, by the electric force. Isaac Newton. That the divided but contiguous particles of bodies may be separated from one another is a matter of observation, and in the particles that remain undivided, our minds are able to distinguish yet lesser parts, as is mathematically demonstrated. The same thing is to be understood of all bodies revolved in any orbits. They all endeavor to recede from the centers of their orbits, and were it not for the opposition of a contrary force which restrains them to and detains them in their orbits, which I therefore call centripetal, would fly off in right lines with a uniform motion. Isaac Newton.